In 2022, we celebrate 130 years of HBCU football. On December 27th, 1892, Livingstone and Biddle College, now known as Johnson C. Smith University, played in Salisbury, North Carolina, with Biddle winning 5-0. Over time, HBCU football has evolved. HBCU football's popularity continues to rise. Millions attend games each year and millions more watch on television. The HBCU bands provide some of the top entertainment in the country. Over that time, some of the best players to ever play in the National Football League played at HBCUs. Every Monday through Friday on the HBCU Football Daily Podcast, national radio and television host Donal Ware takes a look at what's happening in HBCU football and talks with coaches, players, administrators, and media about the 2022 season. Make sure you join the conversation on social media by using the hashtag HBCU130. Now, here's your host, Donal Ware.
This is the HBCU Football Daily Podcast for today, Wednesday, October 26th. I'm Donal Ware. It's the Humpday edition of the HBCU Football Daily Podcast. We're now going to transition to week 9 in HBCU football as these conference races are starting to come down to the wire. And you've got a couple of teams that all they need to do is win one football game to wrap up respective division. So things kick off on tomorrow night. Miles is going to be hosting Edward Waters. That's our only Thursday night game. Let's move to Saturday. Elizabeth City State is hosting Bowie State. Lincoln of Pennsylvania is hosting Virginia State. Virginia State's got to win this game to have any shot at the Northern Division crown. In a big matchup, A&T, the greatest homecoming on earth, is hosting Campbell. This promises to be a good football game, a big South matchup for both teams undefeated in Big South play. The Campbells were at a homecoming last week and got beat by Jackson State 22-14. St. Augustine's is hosting Livingstone. Virginia Union hosting Shawan. Again, you talk about important football games. This is another important football game. Shawan's got to win this game. If Virginia Union wins, Virginia Union wraps up the CIAA's Northern Division. A win by Shawan still would have some work to do. But I got to be doubly sure about that. Shawan, division-wise, and I think it's overall conference. I think division-wise, Shawan may have 3 losses in any way. I mean, if you're Shawan, you got to win this football game to give yourself any possible shot. Virginia Union with a win wraps up the Northern Division. Winston-Salem State hosts Johnson C. Smith. Lincoln of Missouri is looking for that first win of the season on the road at Central Missouri. In a big-time football game, Jackson State is hosting Southern. You got to expect that game would be sold out. And this is going to be a really good football game. You look at Jackson State's undefeated on the season. You look at Southern. Southern, since that loss to Texas Southern, got blanked 24-0. That's going back 3-4 weeks ago. Southern has played some outstanding football. Big win over Alcorn State to boot, and is in a leadership position when you're talking about that SWAC Western Division. A loss here is a big loss for Southern because, again, Texas Southern still looming large with the head-to-head victory over Southern. West Virginia State sort of towards the top of the Mountain East, but like around that 4, 5, 6 area because there's so many teams in the Mountain East. It's a must-win against Glenville State, as West Virginia State since 4-3 in MEC play, while Glenville State since 3-4. Kentucky State is hosting Tuskegee. You talk about big-time football games. This is huge. It's a huge SIAC Western Division matchup, whereas Kentucky State's only got 1 loss in the conference, whereas Tuskegee has 0 losses in the conference. So you can see the importance of this football game. A loss by Tuskegee or a win by Kentucky State means Kentucky State controls its own destiny in terms of an SIAC Western Division crown. And a win by Tuskegee, I think, may wrap up the SIAC's Western Division. Hampton on the road, a tough CAA game against Villanova. Virginia University of Lynchburg on the road at Weber International. In a MEAC contest, Morgan State is hosting South Carolina State. This is an interesting game to me. Morgan State, I think right now essentially is out of the running for the MEAC with 2 losses. But, you know, a lot of times you'll listen to coaches. I was on the conference call. You know, I heard both Damon Wilson, the head football coach at Morgan State, and Buddy Pugh, the head football coach at South Carolina State, talk and speak about their respective teams, but also about the respective opponent, which is each other, if you will. And sometimes, you know, you listen to coaches and they'll talk, but I think Buddy Pugh has real concern about this Morgan State team, because if you look at Morgan State as a home game, Morgan State has really nothing to lose. And not even that. I think more you want to, even though you're out of the conference race, Damon Wilson's first season, lost to Delaware, but was in the game throughout into the third quarter. It's like a 14-7 game, right? So if you're Morgan, you're feeling good. South Carolina State can't stop the run. Morgan's, I mean, you talk about one of the best running backs in Alfonso Graham, Morgan State has in the MEAC. I think there's some real concern there. I mean, I think South Carolina State would win that game, but I can understand. I mean, and I think it's going to be a close game. I think it's going to be a close football game. Lane hosts Central State in SIAC matchup. Langston hosting Louisiana Charleston. Also, you've got Tennessee State on the road against Murray State. So Tennessee State has won 3 straight football games. Your Tennessee State, you want to keep this momentum going against Murray State to stay atop the OVC. Delaware State hosts North Carolina Central. So this is a pivotal game for both teams. I think the loser of this game is out. Both teams, you know, you look at Delaware State, the loss to Howard inexplicably loses to Howard. North Carolina Central with the loss to South Carolina State. The loser of this game, I think, is out of the race in the MEAC. Speaking of MEAC play, Norfolk State is hosting Howard, an important game for both. Howard undefeated in MEAC play. And, you know, you look at this Norfolk State team, and it's a Norfolk State team, you know, that's looking to continue in the MEAC. Hadn't played necessarily well this season, but looking to continue and to stay in the MEAC race. Grambling is hosting Old Corn State. Prairie View A&M is hosting Bethune-Cookman. Bethune-Cookman got the win over Valley last week. And you know, it seems to be playing better as of late. And if you're Prairie View A&M, you want to stay in that race in the Western Division. You cannot afford to get tripped up in this ball game. We've got Texas Southern is hosting Lincoln of California. I'm not sure. Obviously, that's non-conference play. Albany State is hosting Morehouse. Remember, I talked about yesterday, Morehouse is winless, but Albany State is number 1 in the regional with Fort Valley State, with Benedict, you know, with Virginia Union. So, I mean, you can't afford a slip up. If you're Albany State, I don't think Albany State's going to slip up. Benedict hosting Clark Atlanta, same deal here. You're Benedict, you don't want any slip ups. As a matter of fact, I'll go through, after I go through the scoreboard, I'll go through the Division II HBCU coaches poll. In the Magic City Classic, Alabama A&M is hosting Alabama State. An important matchup for both teams. Alabama A&M has played better, only has 1 loss in the SWAC, and still has Jackson State to play. What should have been a pivotal CIAA Southern Division game is not. Fayetteville State is hosting Shaw. Again, if you're Fayetteville State, win that game, you win the CIAA's Southern Division again. Florida A&M is hosting Arkansas Pine Bluff. Arkansas Pine Bluff. Doc Gamble is out. Arkansas Pine Bluff's working with an interim head coach. Florida A&M is hosting Southeastern. Savannah State hosting Fort Valley State. If you're Fort Valley State, It's a must win to keep that ranking in the because if Benedict wins the SIAC Eastern Division, right? So in the event that Benedict loses, if you're Fort Valley State, you want to be right there because now you're back in the Eastern Division race. But more importantly, you're looking for that playoff. And I think Fort Valley State sat at number 4. So good position for Fort Valley State, but you got to take care of Savannah State. Finally, Texas College is hosting Texas Wesleyan. Let's take a look at the HBCU Division II coaches poll, which is powered by Box to Row. There was no change in terms of the top 6. Virginia Union remains number 1, receiving 18 of 21 first place votes, followed by Benedict at number 2, received the other 3 first place votes. Fort Valley State number 3, Albany State number 4, Fayetteville State number 5. 6 through 10 looks like this: Tuskegee, Shawan, Virginia State, West Virginia State, and Bowie State rounding out the top 10. If you want to look at that, you didn't hear all of that. Maybe I said it a little bit too fast. You can log onto our website at boxtorow.com. We will be off. The HBCU Football Daily Podcast will not air on Thursday. We'll resume things on Friday with the HBCU National Game of the Week. Don't forget to tell a couple of friends about the HBCU Football Daily Podcast, where you can find us on our website at boxtorow.com, also on iHeartMedia.com, or wherever you get your podcasts. You can also watch the HBCU Football Daily Podcast on the Box to Row YouTube page. Talk with you on Friday.
We hope you enjoyed this episode of the HBCU Football Daily Podcast. You can also listen to the podcast at boxtorow.com, iHeartMedia, or wherever you get your podcasts. Don't forget to get your HBCU football fix on Box to Row with Donal Ware each weekend on the radio station near you, and on SiriusXM on HBCU, Channel 142, and on ESPNU Radio on SiriusXM, Channel 84. Follow us on Twitter and Instagram at Box to Row for the latest in HBCU football, and don't forget to tell a friend.